Hey, welcome to the presentation for the Dark Feminine. For just the sake of saving and loading, I'm going to keep my video off. Makes it a little bit easier. But we'll get started with the actual presentation. So, thank you for joining for the Dark Feminine. To really get started, when we're talking about the Dark Feminine, we're talking about the side of the feminine energy that really is sort of like pushed down. So it doesn't necessarily mean negative. It doesn't necessarily mean bad or even dark. It's just more of that shadowy self, that more area of ourselves, male or female, that we really repress. So when we're talking about energies in general, we have the divine feminine and masculine. This is present for everybody, no matter if you're male, female, anything in between. For the sake of this presentation, we're going to stick with male and female. The goal of everybody is to have this perfect balance and alignment between the divine feminine and the divine masculine. This is authority, assertiveness, a little bit of aggressiveness, forthcoming, strength from the masculine side. From the divine feminine, it is this warmth, welcoming, steadfast, diligent, head down, motivated. These are the ultimate energies of these two essential energies that we're really striving to add as a part of our lives. When it comes to the yin and yang, or yin and yang, this is that black and white circle that we see. It has a little black circle in the white area, a little white circle in the black area. This is the idea that inside of everything that is positive, there's a little bit of negative, and in everything that is negative, there's a little bit of positive. It's just that perfect balancing of energies to say there are no real high highs and high lows. It's everything is almost always balanced. Natural power dynamics, this is just in here from a more modern perspective. We always have the natural power dynamics within ourselves, an area that we lean. There will be either a natural tendency towards more of the masculine traits, more of those authority, assertive, anything like that, or more of the warmth, the welcoming, the feminine energies as well. So no matter who you are, there is a leniency towards and a tendency towards one of these energies or a few of these energies that really make us who we are. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's natural. When we're talking about balancing dualities in the universe, the dark and light feminine can represent the balance between dualities, such as creation and destruction, nurturing and controlling, and innocence and wisdom. This balance is a key spiritual concept that encourages harmony within yourself. Now, when we're talking about dark feminine as well, we really want to portray this idea of shadow work. So, shadow work involves exploring and integrating the darker aspects of the self, including the dark feminine. This spiritual practice helps individuals become more whole and balanced by acknowledging and healing the shadows within. There are a number of shadow work journals that you can find and collect. There are prompts that you can simply ask ChatGPT. Give me 5, 10, 15 shadow work prompts, all focusing on my inability to let go of control. Anything that's really within you that you know is not of your highest and best, that's going to be your area of shadow work to do some work on. Control is one, judgment of self and others is another example. There could be a number of things, and they're not always necessarily negative, but it's things, again, that don't necessarily serve you. More on the shadow work side of things, this is really working with your unconscious mind to uncover the parts of yourself that you repress and hide from yourself. This can include trauma or parts of your personality that you subconsciously consider undesirable. Shadow work can include or lead up to all of these things underneath. So, insecurities and self doubt, fear of failure, lack of assertiveness, lack of expressing interest or trying new things, declining your own desires, people pleasing, and codependency. So, for example, my brother, he used to be over 600 pounds. And when we're always talking in the metaphysical world about self love, that doesn't just include taking ourselves out for ice cream and buying ourselves flowers. It's if I was treating myself from an outside perspective the way that I am currently treating myself, would that be a good behavior or not? So, for my brother's example, he was always very confident, very strong, very stubborn in who he was. But from a self love perspective, he kind of got to that realization of if I was a child and I am my adult self feeding this child the things that I'm feeding myself, this child would be taken away to Child Protective Services because that's not self love. You know, filling your stomach with junk food is not self love. And so for him, the junk food, the overeating, excessive eating, that was a part of shadow work. And that led into his lack of trying new things or going places because he was always just comfortable being at home, convinced everybody that that's just where he wanted to be, when really it was just this under the surface embarrassment and fear that if we went somewhere, he wouldn't be able to participate because he would be out of breath or tired or whatever. So, and he's had that conversation with us since then. Now he's lost a whole bunch of weight. And this past Christmas, he came back down to the Raleigh area with us and went on this walk that we went on last year and basically threw his middle finger up at all of these stopping points that he had to stop at last time and said, you know what, I'm glad I can walk now and find this path and do this thing. So that's a perfect example of truly facing your shadow work, facing yourself, and saying, where am I accountable for these areas in my life that are not serving me to my highest and best? When we talk about shadow work prompts, we'll go a little bit backwards here. So starting with the work, what triggers me? What am I afraid of? What am I avoiding? What is the source of my trauma and how can I confront it? In what areas am I denying myself truth and authenticity? And what boundaries can I set with myself and others? Boundaries is a really big thing when we're talking not only about shadow work, but about the dark feminine. The dark feminine is somebody who is very, very strong and prompt with boundaries. You know, I know who I am empowered, I am authentic, and there is no shaking my feet out of this concrete cement that I have placed myself in because these are my boundaries and this is who I am. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So, when we're talking about the dark feminine in general, here are certain mantras that would really lead into that area. So, I am a seductive force to be reckoned with. My confidence is irresistible. I am magnetic and alluring. I am empowered. I am a master at the art of seduction. I am a gorgeous, powerful, sensual siren at the height of my womanly power. A lot of times when you look up the archetype of dark feminine, you'll find a lot of very sexual, very sensual people. Sometimes it'll be more of that like gothic side of things as well. You don't have to look like this or act like this or really do anything of the sort to really still embody that dark feminine energy. It's just for the sake of, again, this is who I am, and I'm not afraid of who I am, and I will show the world who I am. And there's a lot of power and a lot of beauty and a lot of sensuality when it comes to that. So that's why these mantras are very specific. So we talked about the divine masculine and the divine feminine. The divine feminine is broken down into light and dark. So the light feminine, this is that pure side of divine feminine energy. This is innocent, selfless epitome of the divine mother. Anytime you hear mother goddess, mother woman, this is that light feminine energy. Their strengths are care and compassion. Their weaknesses, though, are discipline and directness. These are very non-confrontational people. These are your stereotypical girly pops. These are flowers, rainbows. The world is awesome. That type of energy. This is also really the stereotypical woman, you know, the woman at home taking care of the family, taking care of the kids. Live your life in service and compassion of others would be what mantra they would essentially be living in. So again, it's whatever your natural tendency is going to be. A lot of people will lead towards light feminine. However, the light feminine is also pushed onto us from a very young age. So This is where some of that shadow work comes into play to say, is that how I actually align? Is that an area where I feel very actual authentic? The dark feminine says it's okay to not align yourself with that. This is the shadow side of the divine feminine energy. It represents the fiery, transformational side of femininity that fuels the death and rebirth cycles. The dark feminine era has become a trending hashtag and theme, especially on social media platforms like TikTok. The dark feminine is code for rebirth, female empowerment, shadow work, and owning your power. The strengths are all about boundaries and authenticity. Weaknesses are about that softness, and these people can come across as very direct, very brash. And the phrase for them is screw what other people think. So it is very much this rebellious energy. It is, don't tell me what to do. I'm going to be myself. I'm going to do my thing and watch me make that happen. So neither of these are right or wrong. These exist both inside of yourselves, no matter your gender. It is, where do you find a tendency to lean? And again, that dark feminine is saying you can really be who exactly you want to be if it does not look like that light feminine. So the light feminine is often associated with intuition and inner wisdom, while the dark feminine can represent these shadow aspects of these traits, such as manipulation or secrecy. Understanding both aspects can lead to a deeper connection with one's intuition. The dark feminine is often associated with themes of death and rebirth, which can be seen as a spiritual journey of transformation. This process involves letting go of old patterns and embracing new beginnings. Every person has a natural lean towards one or the other, which can include both negative and positive aspects of both. The importance of shadow work in this area. Where can I acknowledge my authenticity, and where does that lead to improvements of myself? Again, these are just things that I am saying essentially over and over and over again. Just as the light feminine has that more weakness side of essentially that kind of cowardice, the lack of discipline, lack of directness. The dark feminine, from a negative perspective, can have that manipulation and secrecy because the tendencies and the background are all about that rebellion, all about, I'm going to be who I want to be. So what? The femme fatale. So this is really the actual negative side of dark feminine. This is the area of dark feminine where we cross the line of now hindering or hurting other people. This is, from a storyline perspective, the overall over-exaggerated version of dark feminine. So the femme fatale archetype typically portrays a woman who is alluring, enigmatic, sometimes dangerous. She's often depicted as using her beauty, charm, and sexuality to manipulate and ensnare others, often with destructive or fatal consequences. This archetype can evoke themes of temptation, betrayal, and the shadow side of femininity. In contrast, the dark feminine archetype encompasses a broader spectrum of qualities and energies beyond just seduction or manipulation. It includes aspects of depth, intuition, inner strength, and transformation. Embracing the dark feminine involves delving into the shadow aspects of the self, facing fears, and embracing the complexities of one's psyche. While there may be overlaps between the two archetypes, the dark feminine extends beyond the traditional portrayal of the femme fatale to encompass a deeper exploration of the shadow self and the mysteries of the feminine psyche. It invites individuals to embrace their darkness as well as their light, fostering empowerment, healing, and self-discovery. So again, if you even just Google femme fatale, you're going to see a lot of images of low-cut dresses. Usually the color red is associated with that femme fatale archetype. It's all about that idea of the fire is so seductive and alluring, but if I touch it, I'm going to get burned. This is that energy. This is, don't talk to this person or you will be under their spell. So it's very much on that line of making sure that we're not hindering other people by being in our power. So from a spiritual perspective and even historical perspective, different goddesses from various mythologies represent both the dark and the light feminine aspects. For example, the Hindu goddess Kali embodies destruction and creation, while Lakshmi represents abundance and prosperity. Lakshmi is heard all around spirituality. This is really part of that like divine mother entity and embodiment and idea. This is a character and a spiritual figure that a lot of women look up to as this divine feminine nature, not only for abundance and prosperity, but for femininity in general. And in the contrast, we have Lilith and Medusa to really show more of those sides of the dark feminine. When you look up Lilith, it's very interesting because in the spiritual world, there's no acknowledgement of hell or demons or a devil. It's all just the ether. And, what do we need to learn? Where do we go from here? Type of thing. So when we have Lilith depicted as this demon, it's more of that modern take of a woman that goes against the grain. So it really makes you think about what storytelling has led into and what people's own opinions will turn characters into. But it's very interesting. So Lilith is a figure from Jewish mythology, often considered the first wife of Adam. She is associated with independence and rebellion as she refuses to be subservient to Adam and leaves the Garden of Eden. Lilith embodies the dark feminine through her independence, assertiveness, and defiance of traditional gender roles. She's often associated with themes of sensuality, mystery, and danger. In pop culture, Lilith is often depicted as a powerful and seductive figure with supernatural abilities. She can be seen as a temptress, a demon, or a goddess, depending on the interpretation. Lilith's character is complex, blending aspects of empowerment and autonomy with darker traits such as revenge. So again, in TV shows like Supernatural, Lilith is actively trying to go against people, but in reality, she's just trying to do her own thing and not really follow the rules. So is she wrong? Is she bad? Not necessarily, but it depends on the person's opinion who's depicting her. Medusa, on the other hand, this is really where we get into a more specific modern take on the dark feminine. This is when we're growing up watching princess stories, we're always seeing these crone type creatures and witches as the villains in these princess stories. And now, as an adult, you say, why? Why are they villains? What did they do that was wrong? So, this is a perfect example of that. Medusa is a figure from Greek mythology, originally depicted as a beautiful maiden who is transformed into a gorgon with snakes for hair after offending Athena. Her gaze turns people to stone. Medusa embodies the dark feminine through her monstrous appearance, vengeful nature, and deadly powers. She represents the danger and fear of the unknown and the potential consequences of a woman's anger. In pop culture, Medusa is often depicted as a tragic figure, both beautiful and terrifying. She is seen as a symbol of female rage and victimization turned power. Medusa's character is complex as she can be seen as both a victim and a villain. Her story raises questions about beauty, punishment, and the consequences of male aggression. Again, this is very specific to anti-men, and we see that in a lot of stories in modern times. In order to be dark feminine, a lot of people think that you have to be anti-male or anti-man, and that's not the case whatsoever. However, in Medusa's case, it very much is. It is this idea of do not touch me, do not test me, do not look at me as some sexual object. And if you do, then there will be consequences. This is very relevant to what we'll talk about. I'll skip that last slide for a second. The characters. So we have the Wicked Witch of the West from The Wizard of Oz, or Wicked from 2024, Elphaba. This is the green girl, the Wicked Witch of the West. When you actually watch Wicked, or even really The Wizard of Oz, it's, again, why is she a villain? What did she do wrong? It's important for us to ask these questions rather than just take it at face value. When we talk about Elphaba, she is almost exactly the same thing as Medusa. People don't like her and have these stereotypes against her just because she's green and she has powers and she has no problem being her authentic self and even joking about the way that she's green. So there's empowerment and a little bit of that dark feminine because of how much these people have had to be victims time and time and time and time again. So it's how do I turn my victimization into power? And sometimes that can cross the line into villainhood. So it is very interesting, even in terms of movies and things like that, that we're seeing it. A couple other characters to mention, particularly from a horror perspective, because we're talking about horror movies. So we have Carrie White from Carrie from 1976. This is the girl who goes to prom and gets the blood dropped all on her. Again, another perfect example. She's not really doing anything wrong in her day-to-day life, but she's picked on, she's bullied. Her mother has these religious repressions on her. And so it's finally what's going to make this girl snap. And prom night does it. So she now uses all of that rage and all of that energy and snaps on everybody and turns into an actual villain by killing people. But the lesson is still there. We also have Morticia Adams from the Addams family. This is a perfect example of the dark feminine. She knows what she wants, she knows what her family is. It is the stereotypical dark feminine from the gothic nature and the dark side of things. But it's, I mean, that's perfect. We also then have Jennifer Check from Jennifer's Body. If you are interested in watching any of these movies, I would 100% recommend watching Jennifer's Body. I rewatched it this past year after watching it a long time ago, and all of the lessons still stand. And it's a perfect example of assumptions and stereotypes gone wrong. Next, we have Asami Yamazaki from Audition. This is a pretty brutal movie, but the point being that this man, his wife is dead, and he's now fake auditioning people for this lifetime role. However, it's actually auditioning them to be his next wife. So he hires this girl, she figures out his plan, and so she essentially puts karma on him, gets back at him in pretty nasty ways. We have Samara Morgan from The Ring. This is the girl with all the black hair in her face. I used to be terrified of her. But this is another example that leads into Elphaba and Medusa. You know, Samara is so scary and she's killing people through these videotapes and through the VHS tapes. And really, it's just this victimhood. She was pushed down a well by her mother at a very young age and was stuck down there. I mean, that's got to make you go crazy. So it's how do we have some compassion for people who are different than us? And from her perspective, how can she essentially forgive her mother as well? We have Annie Wilkes from Misery. This is the epitome of like that mad woman, the crazed woman, the archetype in a movie and in a story. This is where the dark feminine has gone wrong as well. But you're also doing anything that you possibly can to get what you want. The femme fatale gained prominence in European literature and drama, particularly during the Romantic and Victorian eras. Characters like Shakespeare's Lady Macbeth and John Milton's Eve in Paradise Lost exhibit traits of seduction, manipulation, and moral ambiguity. Again, the femme fatale is we're crossing the line into harming other people from a sexual perspective 9 out of 10 times. Whereas the dark feminine is just, here I am, look at that. I know I keep repeating myself, but that is the lesson, you know? So going back to archetypes and stereotypes, when we're thinking of the light feminine energy and the dark feminine energy, we're thinking light is that stereotypical girly girl, the pinks, the lights, the rainbows, the la-di-da. Whereas the dark feminine energy is more of the darker colors, the goth, the tomboy. This can be just really anything that doesn't look like, oh, we're having a baby girl, let's paint the room pink. From an actual character perspective, we have witches, sirens, dark mothers. These are all characters that would be considered that dark feminine. Like I mentioned before, when we're looking at childhood movies, we're thinking about all of the villains that we see in these princess movies, and most of them are witch-like creatures. We have the crone, which is very interesting and something I like to talk about all the time. From a folklore perspective, the crone is this idea of kind of like Baba Yaga, which is the mother witch. And this crone is thought to be this horribly disfigured, old, ancient woman with a humpback and a mole on her nose, carrying a cane sometimes. It really looks like the stereotypical lady who has never left the woods. However, when we're talking about folklore with the crone, these are people who did actually exist. And this is the idea of a woman turning 50 years old. Not that old. Excuse me. So when we think of these old ancient witches, 50 is, it's not 100, it's not even 80. 50 is not that old. But that leads into the conversation of our relationship with aging, with the feminine areas as well. And not only the fear of aging, but also, oh, you must be old and ancient and ugly then. We also have the priestess and the mad woman or the wild woman. This is what I was talking about with like Annie Wilkes. You have these, I will do absolutely whatever it takes to get what I want, and I don't care how I'm going to do it. And there's a little bit of madness that comes with that as well. You also have the idea of back in the 40s and the 50s, 90% of the people who were sent to insane asylums were women, and they were sent there by their husbands because of their disobedience, because of their actual opinions. And it's really very sad when we think about it. And there's almost this collective inner child shadow work healing that we can do with that mad woman, wild woman mentality, and say to all of these people who were wrongfully put in psychiatric hospitals, like, I am so sorry for you. I'm so sorry that you had to deal with that. But also, thank you for shedding a light onto the mistreatment that all of these people have had. We also have the huntress. This is just the idea of women can do what boys can do. We can go hunting, we can take care of ourselves, that whole thing. The two things that are highlighted, I'll just skip for now. Jennifer's Body, again, this is a snippet from the person who created the movie, talking about women in horror movies, saying that it's more about empowerment, not about fear. So it leads into what we keep saying about, be who you are, be authentic, don't be afraid of being yourself, and then you have nothing in the world to fear because you know that you know who you are. You have your own back. You've done all your own work, everything like that. And then from a femme fatale perspective, a little bit, we have this song. It's called American Horror Show. It's by a girl named Snow Wife, which is a play on Snow White, which really does make it fun. But this song is all about more of the sexual nature. It's, if I put all of my fetishes and all of my kinks out there for everybody to see, how can you use it against me? Because I'm owning it. I'm owning what I'm into. I'm owning who I am. And so be it. So there's a lot of power in that song in particular. And there's a lot of power in Jennifer's Body as a movie. So this lady down here, her name is Lady Demetrius. She's from a video game called Resident Evil Village. This is the highest grossing horror game ever because of how many people have found her to be this femme fatale type. What is very ironic about it is the fact that she hates men in this video game. You, as the actual video game player, are playing as this man who's looking for his friend. We come across her castle, essentially, and she's there protecting all of her sisters and her daughters. She is a vampire, and she is so terribly difficult to beat and fight against. But it's, again, we go back to that idea of the flame of a candle, the flame of a fire is so beautiful until we go to touch it and we get burned. This is exactly what we're talking about with this lady. It is, you are beautiful and you are alluring and you are sensual, but you're going to rip my face off. So the femme fatale became an iconic figure in film noir, a genre of Hollywood cinema characterized by its dark, cynical natures and morally ambiguous characters. Again, it's who's going to be essentially a victim at the cost of what I'm going to do. So additional characteristics and crystals. So when we're thinking about really embodying this idea of dark feminine, again, whether you're male or whether you're female, you can add some of these elements into your life to really almost essentially create this character of yourself. It can be even an alter ego for you. We're going to get into the more sensual, not safe for work stuff in a minute, but that also can be an element of role play. You bring this dark feminine character out to play in the bedroom for a specific point of time. And this is where you feel like you can really embody this character. So, in terms of scents, we have amber, vanilla, oak, woodsy. It is very interesting to me that vanilla is the number one scent feminine, for feminine scent. But if we're taking it and we're turning it into dark feminine, we're adding a little bit to it. So not only do we have these like warmer scents to really welcome people in, but there may be a splash of little like rum in there or bourbon, something that adds that element of zhuzh, that element of danger. And when we're thinking about that femme fatale scent, we have okcha, which is again even more of that like probably like vanilla rum or vanilla bourbon, any of those types of scents where it's like, ooh, that smells good, but also there's something secret underneath. When we are talking about colors, it's not just black for these goths, it's not black for dark feminine. You also have the burgundy, the plum, the dark emerald. As I mentioned before with the femme fatale, it is always this idea of red. So the bright red lips, the long red hair, or just the long hair, the long nails, the high heels. These are really the exaggerated features of the femme fatale, whereas the dark feminine is really encompassing more of those dark jewel tones. Might have like a darker red lip, something like that. In terms of ambiance, this is all about like velvet, candlelight, plants. It really screams gothic luxury. It screams, you are welcome here, and you're going to get lost in this dark forest. It's the warm lighting because it is still welcoming, but it's what is seen in the shadows of these candle lights as well, and not to fear it. In terms of symbols, we have the serpent, which is broom, moon phases, skulls. These are elements that you can just have as backgrounds on your phone or phone cases or whatever, any little thing like these that you can just place around your home, you can welcome in this energy. And then in terms of actual crystals, so emerald is going to be a great crystal. It can be a darker green, it can be a brighter green, but it's going to bring in some of those earthly elements to your home, as well as represent that prosperity and abundance. Dragon's blood is my favorite crystal, one of my favorite scents as well. There are some people who will combine dragon's blood with the scent of sage, so that you're not only kind of letting go of some of that negative energy with the sage, but also welcoming in abundance with the dragon's blood. And again, this is more of an earthly stone as well. For black tourmaline, this is all about grounding. This is bringing you back to earth. This is also keeping you safe and protected. So while we're embodying this dark feminine energy, we're not afraid of the world, but we're also being extra strong in our boundaries. I wear a black tourmaline bracelet every single day. And anytime that I have it off, I feel almost vulnerable, which sometimes can be a good thing. You want to be honest, you want to be open to certain people and things. But if you're just going to the grocery store and you want to be by yourself and not have anybody bother you, this is what black tourmaline is doing. It's almost preventing, like giving you that shield in a sense. Smoky quartz, this is the same thing as regular quartz. This is all about clarity, welcoming in authenticity in our thoughts, in our actions, keeping things clear. The smokiness of it just brings on that almost dramatic effect. And then we have dumortierite. This is the stone of really owning who we are. It's looking at every single aspect of ourselves and saying, what do I love about myself? What do I maybe not like so much about myself? How can I change it? And how can I have the courage to either embrace or change whatever it is as well? From the feminist movement side of things, it is typically separated into three waves. So we have first wave feminism dealing with property rights and the right to vote, second wave feminism focusing on equality and anti-discrimination, and third wave feminism, which started in the 1990s as a backlash to the second wave's perceived privileging of white straight women. Feminist scholars and critics have offered interpretations of the femme fatale that challenge traditional stereotypes and narratives. Some argue that the femme fatale represents a subversive and empowering figure who disrupts patriarchal norms and expectations. When we're talking about the feminist movements in general, it is really all about having just an equal seat at the table. It's not about, again, we're going back to the root of this is not about man bashing, this is not about man hate. Men are very much a part of the feminist movement. It is just about everybody having an equal seat at the table. So we have the suffrage movement, we have the women's liberation movement, we have Black feminism, the feminist sex wars, and riot girls. Girls are pretty cool. They were around in the 1980s. This was very much what we are thinking about and what we're talking about the dark feminine, about that rebellion, about the do not tell me what to do mentality. And then in modern times, we have songs like WAP by Cardi B. This is, I'm not going to play it, but it's super raunchy at the extent of making a point. It is saying that all of these male rappers can rap about however many people they're banging and hooking up with and doing. And women are thought to be whores and hoes if they're doing that. So we're just going to take back the empowerment and say, yeah, I like to get laid. Yeah, I like having sex. Yeah, I want to have somebody be with me. This is all a very G-rated version of saying that, but that's the premise. And then I will never be your Cinderella is the lyric in that American Horror Show song that I mentioned before by Snow White. And it's the idea of like, I will never be your princess. I'll never be that light feminine. So please don't make me. So this is where we get into some of that not safe for work side of things. So when we're thinking about the dark feminine, we are not only embodying what we like in ourselves, what we are, some of that shadow stuff that we do repress, but it also does involve some of those fetishes and those kinks. So it's the idea of this is what I'm into. I'm not ashamed of it. And I'm going to bring that to the table and own it. So from the more sexual side of things, we have the Kama Sutra. Again, another thing that is very interesting from a stereotype perspective. For me, growing up from a Catholicism background, everything sexual is repressed and pushed down, and you're not supposed to do it. You're not supposed to think about that. You're not supposed to have these desires, so don't acknowledge them. When we think about the Kama Sutra, it's like, oh, don't touch that. That's just the book of sex. So there is more in the Kama Sutra than what it seems. This is all about having good relationships and how do we maintain relationships with other people? How do we put ourselves in a vulnerable position while we also uphold our boundaries? There's a lot of powerful content in here. It's not just about sex. So again, it's peeling back the layers of these onions of things that we're told and saying, well, why? Why? So the Kama Sutra is believed to have been written by Vatsyana in India during the Gupta period around the 3rd to 4th century CE. It is part of the broader tradition of Indian literature and the subject of Kama, which is pleasure, which encompasses not just the sexual pleasure, but also aesthetic and sensual enjoyment. The text is divided into 7 books, each focusing on different aspects of relationships, intimacy, and pleasure. Topics include seduction, courtship, sexual positions, the role of women and men in relationships, and the cultivation of desire. When it comes to the relationship to the genre of dark feminine, the Kama Sutra explores the power dynamics within relationships, including the roles and agency of both men and women. This exploration of power and autonomy can resonate with themes of the dark feminine, particularly in its emphasis on desire and control. The text discusses the art of seduction and the importance of sensuality in relationships. These themes can align with the allure and mysterious qualities often associated with the dark feminine archetype. While the Kama Sutra was written in a specific cultural context with its own perspectives on gender roles, it does provide insight into the autonomy and agency of women in relationships, which can connect to the dark feminine's emphasis on independence and power. So again, I keep saying the same thing over and over again, but it is all about what do you want and how strong are you in who you are, in what you believe in to go after it. This now leads into the darker side of things. So BDSM. This is an umbrella term used to describe a sexual practice that involves use of physical control, psychological power, or pain. It typically includes the components of bondage and discipline, which is the BD, domination and submission, or sadism and masochism, which is that SM side of things. So, BDSM is a practice that a lot of people will do in partnerships. There are clubs that are more secretive that people can go to. And this is really a way to channel all of this dark feminine energy. If you are not comfortable embodying that in your personality on a day to day basis, this is an opportunity for you to really breathe life into it in the comfort and safety of your partnership, of your home, whatever it is. Again, for me, talking about the Catholicism background and not even knowing what I'm into because it wasn't even a conversation, being able to be introduced into the BDSM world in a safe perspective really opened my eyes to say, in a day-to-day basis, I love control. I love being in control. I like making decisions. I feel very natural doing that. So inside of the bedroom, I can now relinquish control. I can have somebody tell me what to do. I can let some of these feelings go in a true safe environment where I am completely trusting somebody else. It's also a good trust exercise for your partner as well. So, being able to explore some of these themes in the privacy of your own home in a safe environment with nothing but exploration on your mind, I am always an encourager of it. The areas that I'm not encouraging of, we'll talk about in a minute. So, the dark feminine often embodies seductive and alluring qualities. And BDSM seduction can play a key role in the interaction between partners as each person navigates the power dynamic. BDSM can involve exploring desires and fantasies that may be considered taboo or unconventional. The dark feminine often operates with similar realms, challenging societal norms and expectations. BDSM relationships often require trust, communication, and consent between partners, allowing them to explore the depths of their desires and emotions. This complexity resonates with the nuanced portrayal of the dark feminine. BDSM can provide a space for individuals to express their desires and assert their autonomy within the boundaries of consensual relationships. This empowerment aligns with the dark feminine's themes of independence and self-determination. Engaging in BDSM can lead to self-discovery and personal growth, much like the exploration of the dark feminine in literature and art can reveal deeper aspects of the self. So, as I mentioned, BDSM often involves exploring power dynamics in relationships, with one partner taking on a dominant role and the other a submissive role. This can connect with the dark feminine's themes of control, manipulation, and assertiveness. So, from the dominant perspective, again, as I was mentioning, for me, on a day-to-day basis, I'm always in control. I'm always making decisions. So on paper, it would make sense that I would align naturally with that dominatrix mentality. This is from a stereotype perspective, the woman all in leather, holding the whip, telling somebody what to do. It doesn't have to be that dramatic or theatrical. It can if you really want to lean in, but it can be something as simple as in the bedroom telling somebody exactly what you want, when you want it, what to do, all of these things. Whereas the submissives, on the other hand, are being told what to do, when to do it, when to move, when to whatever. So you can be both. There are people who consider themselves switches or swaps. It doesn't really matter. I think that the labels of the BDSM world make it feel a little bit unattainable, and it doesn't have to be. There are people who are in it on a day-to-day basis and live their lives by going to work with a chastity belt on and come home at the end of the day and have rules that they can't talk until they wake up the next morning, or they can't use the bathroom. Like, that's where it gets to certain levels of the psychological side of it, especially from that submissive side. There are people who call themselves slaves and they have absolutely no say. So it's okay, well, you're not allowed to eat dinner tonight because, like, you misbehaved or you didn't do something that I told you to do. So, like, that's that. And then they consider that some part of this sexual gratification or satisfaction sometimes. Other times it's just that they want to be told what to do. But from a psychological perspective, sometimes that leads to neglect, to a feeling of unsafe, reverts them a little bit back to childhood. So that's where the empowerment side of it gets a little fuzzy. But again, that's why that big picture, if you're just using it from an exploration perspective, that's where I would always encourage it. So, lean in, see what you find. That's all I'm saying. Have an open mind. Submissives often have the power to express vulnerability and trust in the dominance, allowing for deep emotional connections to form. The act of surrendering control to a trusted dominant can be empowering for submissives and may lead to feelings of intimacy, fulfillment, and growth. So that is where this presentation ends. I know we're ending it on a banger, literally, but again, all of these things breathe together. It is the idea of not only accepting the darker parts of ourselves, the things that society says that you shouldn't be into, you shouldn't do, you shouldn't like, blah, blah, blah. But it's also saying why? Why do I like these things? And why am I repressing them? Why am I putting away my desires and my thoughts and my hopes to become somebody else, essentially, to become this empowered version of myself? So not only does it start with that shadow work, with facing some of those things, we hide from ourselves as well, it then goes into that empowerment piece, really become that person, become that character. And then the third is really just embody it. The more that you can lean into wherever your natural tendencies are on a day-to-day basis, you will become your most authentic self. And then that's how you can show up. That's how you can live your life the most you version that you can. And as all of this dark feminine and that femme fatale leads into more of that sensual area, this can be an area for you to gain some confidence as well. From a male perspective or a female perspective, it's what am I into? What do I like? And who can support me on that journey too? So it's all about having an open mind, being honest with yourself, and hopefully knowing that a lot of these themes are reflected in pop culture and movies and songs, all of the things. So as always, thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, any thoughts, any comments that come off of this, I am always open to talking about this stuff. My book, Burn Her Down, is on Amazon. It really explores all of this idea of BDSM, the dark feminine, these themes in a attainable perspective. The main character, her name is Alexa. She's an HR person, but she has all of these secrets behind the scenes. And she doesn't need to tell everybody these secrets, but she can at least embody them and know that they are hers to own. So this is an opportunity to explore where lines get crossed, where things happen, and what's sort of in between. But from a spiritual perspective, I will also be at the Body Mind Spirit Expo in Raleigh this weekend doing readings. I'm offering shadow work readings. These are intuitive readings that can help you at least take that first step to saying, I don't even know where to start with shadow work. I don't know where to start with these areas of myself I don't really want to face. So where do I go? That's what some of these readings can help with as well. So no matter what, I hope you took something off of this and out of this, and I appreciate your support, and I hope to see you soon.